Welcome to the Pivot PRN podcast. I'm your host, Cecilia Motto.
And I'm your co-host, Connie Betts. We are both nurses who dare to dream beyond the bedside, and we're ready to share our experiences and those of others who have found themselves at a crossroads in their careers.
Every month, we'll bring you authentic conversations filled with practical tips and wisdom to help you better navigate the twists and turns of a scary career transition.
So, if you're ready to make a change, you're in the right place. It's time to take control of your life, PRN style.
Ready for your pivot? Let's do this.
Okay, welcome everybody to season 2, episode 1 of Pivot PRN. I'm super excited about the guests I have today. I'm super inspired by her, and I know she'll inspire a lot of you too. She goes by Tasha Triana, and she is transformational coach, hypnotherapist, Reiki master, and registered nurse. Also host of the podcast Next Level Self. You can find her on the nurturednurse.co, Instagram at the nurtured nurse. And I think so, Tosh, I'll let you sort of tell your story. So it just really briefly kind of catch us up on your career as a nurse and sort of where you are now.
Okay. Thank you so much, Cecilia, for having me. It's an honor to be here. And yeah, to give you a little bit of context and the Cliff's Notes version before we dive deeper. Let's see. I always say my first love was psychology. So I actually first started in the world of psychology. I got my undergrad and my master's in psych and have always been fascinated by the human mind.
How cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yep. I love psychology and human mind, human behavior, relationships. And it was actually living in Costa Rica for 3 summers that inspired me to, speaking of pivots, I've had many pivots in my career and in my life.
More than one.
And yeah, more than one.
Wow.
And so I was working in the field of psych and getting my graduate degree. And then I decided after traveling and living in Costa Rica to pivot to nursing because I had met many people there, like in the Peace Corps, and just, I really love helping people. And I thought, nursing could be a cool way to like live anywhere in the world, help people, travel and work anywhere. And so I decided to pivot at that time. And I worked in the hospital. My dream was to work for Doctors Without Borders and be a nurse. And so I actually went through that whole process, went to nursing school, worked in the hospital, applied. And when I applied, they said my application looked really good, but they needed French speakers because they wanted to send people to countries that spoke French. And I was like, oh man, I only speak Spanish and English, and I definitely don't know French.
Really?
So I just took it as like a sign from the universe that my path was pivoting again, like another pivot. And I just trusted it. And in that process, I started to just really develop a love for wellness, more holistic practices like yoga, meditation. I got certified in many modalities. And then I started coaching other nurses and started a business in 2018, and then eventually pivoted out of working as a bedside nurse. I worked in postpartum for almost a decade.
That's so cool. Yeah, I didn't know that about you, that you had a career you were in school for something else before nursing. So that's so cool. But that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it goes along with the work that you do now. And did you coach a lot of nurses?
Yeah, I did.
Good. Oh, wow.
Yeah, I coached a lot of nurses. It just happened really organically. A lot of nurses would come to me for advice, guidance on setting boundaries, on self-care, on all of these things. At first, I didn't realize like, oh, wow, actually, I really love helping people in this realm. And I'd always been fascinated too by the psychology of my patients and how that really impacted their healing journey and like their mindset and their beliefs that they had. And I could really see even deeper the connection between the mind and the body. So it inspired me to start coaching. And first it was really, my focus was on healthcare workers, whether it was doctors, nurses, people in the bedside setting. And then that also started to kind of transform as I worked with clients. It was really not specifically healthcare workers, but anyone who really wanted to up-level their life, go into their greatest potential, release limitations and blocks that were kind of getting in the way. And then eventually, after the pandemic, I left the hospital in May of 2021. So now almost 5 years. Yeah.
Did the pandemic have something to do with your decision to sort of leave the bedside?
Well, actually, this is a really interesting story, and talking about like, our stories and paths are never really linear. I actually had attempted, well, I did leave the hospital in February of 2020, right before the pandemic. And I moved from San Francisco to the Caribbean, to a small island in
What?
Nicaragua. And I had left, and I was planning to do my first retreat at that time. And I was on the island for about 3 weeks. And then the pandemic, as we know, the world shifted. And so I was on an island, and I thought, okay, I could stay here and I have no idea what could unfold. I also don't know anybody here on this island that's very small. Or I could go back to California, go back to San Francisco where I was living, go back to the hospital. And I decided to go back to California. And then I went back to San Francisco. I went back to work at the hospital I was at. And then that provided the additional clarity that, yes, I was ready to leave. So I worked through most of the pandemic, which was interesting, as you know.
Interesting. Yeah. You worked postpartum during the pandemic or a different
Yes.
unit?
Yep. Yeah,
Wow.
same.
I can't imagine like having had a baby now myself, like not having all my family with me. So I'm sure the restrictions were severe probably in the
Yeah, in the
hospital.
beginning, yes, they were, especially in the beginning, as so much uncertainty and so much was unknown. In the
It-
beginning, partners weren't even allowed, women were just by themselves. And then things kind of shifted, which, yeah, as you know, being a mom, going through something that's so life changing and vulnerable. And then even being a nurse, I remember how covered up we had to be. We could literally, we were wearing gowns and masks. Of course, everyone was wearing masks. And really all the patient could see was your eyes. And yeah, it was such a weird experience, especially
yeah.
because, as we all went through it, we realized, how much we miss seeing someone's entire face. And I would get
Yeah.
off the shift feeling even more exhausted, because I would try to like smile even bigger so my patients could like see my eyes were smiling. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they can't really see my facial expressions at all. So it was a very interesting experience.
Yeah, it's so like, oh my God. Yeah, I feel so bad for the mothers that didn't have their partners or just like, and the fact that you had to almost overcompensate with all these layers to
Yes,
to be the you were like their main source of emotional support. Like you were the only like live person there. And then, oh my God, I can't imagine. I remember after giving birth, like I was so like, I felt so like lost, like mentally and emotionally. So just wow, like that's pretty incredible. But and it's yeah, just an amazing moment in time, like for nursing and what it did. Yeah, that was very like, I don't know, like a defining moment, I feel like, for like all nurses, and
definitely.
what they were doing in their careers and how it like really shaped them to be the nurses that we are now, or the healers that we are now.
Totally. Yeah, it was none of us saw it coming. We had to roll with it. And there were so many uncertain variables, a lot that we had never, I mean, so much was unknown, and just navigating that. Every time I went to work, it was like new rules, new protocols, everything had shifted. And so there was just a lot of change and a lot of uncertainty that everyone went through together.
Yeah, for sure. And also amazing too that you like chose like it was a conscious choice for you to like go back to the hospital, which like some nurses I feel like we were it was just bad timing. We were kind of in the like like uh like my previous co-host Connie like was working. I feel so bad for her. Like she was working in downtown LA, like in like it was like a hotbed of like COVID. But but it wasn't, I don't know. I don't know if it was every nurse's choice to be like working with COVID patients. Some units were converted into COVID units, and there were so many things that weren't our choice, I guess, and we felt like our boundaries crossed in different ways. And but it's also like remarkable how you chose to come back. You were like on a tropical island and chose to come back to hell, basically. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a conscious decision, and thank you for for honoring that. And I'm grateful I made that choice. Like looking back in hindsight, there were definitely moments where I was like, did I make the right choice? But I am glad that I, as crazy as the times were, got to experience it and just be there for humanity in the ways that I could, because I think it really required a lot of us to come together and show up. And I feel really grateful living in San Francisco at that time, because the city itself, everyone was so grateful. Like people would put signs on their windows and on their garage, like, thank you, healthcare workers, and thank you, people who work in grocery stores and mail delivery people. And so it just felt like a very supportive city to be in, and a very community-based city. And so I feel grateful for that. And yeah, it was a wild experience.
Yeah, and pretty unifying too. Like I know like San Francisco as a city is like very diverse, and like
Yes.
there's people of all backgrounds and beliefs, but I feel like it was one of those like strange unifying moments, I think, where we were all just trying to keep each other safe and wanting each other to be well, and unified in honoring healthcare workers. So that's really special.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it was almost like your Doctors Without Borders moment in a way.
Yeah, totally. That's a good way of looking at it. Actually, I didn't make that connection, but yeah, absolutely. Percent.
Like you answered the call and you traveled to go help when you didn't need to.
Yeah, it's true. Some elements are for sure overlapping in that. And yeah, it's a great connection. I didn't even make that. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's really true. And I think that sometimes, or a lot of times, the universe works in mysterious ways and takes us on a detour that, we might not have planned, but it ended up being a great moment of growth and evolution.
For sure. Yeah. So very, very cool. And I love listening about your life, because I feel like every time you talk about it, you say something new that I didn't know before. And like all like the many, many, many pivots that you've made, it also just speaks to like your confidence in yourself, or like your trust in that like things will work out, which, some people cultivate all their lives learning that. But like, it seems like even when you were young, you still had that like really healthy mindset. Like even then, like you trusted your intuition. And
Yeah, thank you for that reflection. I do trust my intuition now more than before, and I'll still get tested and expanded. And I would say that in itself has been an evolution as well. I think to see where I was and where I am, I'm proud of myself. And I think that's a good feeling to have. And even each week, I take time every Sunday to spend reflecting on my wins and celebrations from the previous week. And it's a practice I've done for several years now. And even the other day, as I was on a walk, just really thinking about, wow, it is so true, that saying that your past self will be proud of where, your future self is. And I do a lot of work with future self. And I do stop to really take gratitude, for the journey, even the hard moments or the challenges, because without those, I wouldn't be who I am. So all of it is, part of the journey. And I am an adventurer at heart. So I just say life is an adventure. And sometimes it's the unknown moments that end up being the most memorable, even if you didn't plan them.
Yeah. I just love your attitude towards life, and just you always can spin things into a positive. And I can see how you had already I feel like you mastered already at a young age how to be compassionate to yourself. I feel I know I think I don't know, maybe you had really, really good female figures in your life, but I feel like you learned how to talk to yourself in a nice way. Am I wrong? I feel like you're good at being
You're
kind
right
to yourself.
and wrong. It depends, right? How we define it. I'd say it's both. I'd say the self-love and self-compassion for me is a lifelong journey, and I'm always going deeper with it. And again, I've come such a far way. I remember the other day I was on a hike with a friend, and she was saying, wow, it's hard to imagine that you used to struggle with boundaries. And I said, oh yeah, it was so tough. I would sweat when I was setting a boundary. And there still are times where, I'm challenged and stretched, and there's always another level. But yeah, it's just years of the continuous growth and really prioritizing my self-care, my relationship with myself. And I truly believe that the relationship we have with ourselves is the most important one we'll ever have, because it sets the foundation for everything. And that, like I said, is my lifelong learning. And I used to say that my inner voice was so much more like a drill sergeant. Like, we have to do this. We got to get this. It was a little bit more harsh. And now sometimes that voice will still pop in, in some moments, and I can catch it now a lot quicker. But really, it is just continually like, okay, if we catch it, we see it, we can shift. We catch it, we see it, we can shift. And I think sometimes, it's easier for certain people to be kind or compassionate to others, and we forget about ourselves. And I know especially nurses and healthcare workers, and from the clients I've worked with who are, helpers, healers, practitioners, it often seems to be a pattern that it's easier to be kind to others, and we often forget about ourselves. And so for me, that's something that I have really worked on for myself. And so I thank you for that reflection. And it's something that I really empower my clients to do for themselves as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So so I'm just like trying to imagine being you and like being a postpartum nurse, like post COVID. And so like, how did you bridge the gap to hypnotherapy? Did you learn of it because you were receiving it, or is that how that started?
Yeah. Well, I just became really interested in the subconscious mind. One thing about me is I'm a super curious person, and I'll always follow my curiosity, even if it's random. I'm like, oh, I'm interested in this thing. Cool. Let's explore it. Let's dive deeper. And as you know, I'm a Scorpio, which I love depth. I love transformation. Like, that's very me. And so anything that interests me, I dive deeper on. And so I just started getting really interested on a deeper level with the subconscious mind. I became really interested in Joe Dispenza's work, who is also all about the subconscious, and working in healthcare too. And even from a young age, I really have loved holistic health. Like, the first time I went to acupuncture, I was 13 because my grandma used to go. Yeah. And so I had that like planted as a seed really young too, that there were other ways besides Western med. And so that also just really planted a seed. And I don't know, I think this is very like intrinsically me, but I've always believed that we can heal and we can, overcome things that are within the body with the power of the mind and body, and that our body really wants to heal. And so just studying healing, and again, Joe Dispenza, his work has really been profound for me. And when I was wanting to shift out of the hospital, I knew for quite a while, but I took time to really use that time to explore, to build my business. There were moments when I thought, okay, I want to leave the hospital. When am I going to do it? And I thought, okay, we just need to trust the process. It'll all happen when it's supposed to. And so I did decide to work with a hypnotherapist as I was in that like in between where I knew I wanted to leave, but I was still working in the hospital. I had my business that I was growing. And so I had a session with her. And she said, okay, what do you want to work on? First, we had a conversation, and then we had the session. And I told her I really wanted to like essentially be my future self, which is why I'm so passionate about this work now. And so she did a session with me, after speaking with me, and I kind of described what I wanted my future to look like. And she did the session, she gave me the recording, and that was very powerful. However, once I got the recording from her and started listening to it, I had this idea that, this would probably be even more powerful if I recorded it in my voice. And so I wrote out a new, like essentially I journaled and created a script, and then I recorded it, and I started listening to it every single morning, first thing, like a morning meditation that I created, but future self.
Yeah.
And then the things started actually happening. And so I thought, this is powerful. And then through that, then I decided to become certified in hypnosis and hypnotherapy. And that was kind of my entry that really just, I'm like, this is my thing. This is it.
That's so cool. And also that you had the intuition to like take it a step further, and knowing it would be more powerful to record in your own voice is pretty amazing. And in your business at that time, that was the coaching business?
Yes. Yeah. I was coaching, and I was also, before the pandemic, when I was living in San Francisco, I was also teaching a meditation class at a meditation studio. And so really just exploring other modalities and more of like the spiritual path. And that really just opened me up to different ways of being. And so I was doing that, teaching meditation. And then, I had my coaching business. And then I was also doing Reiki as well. So those were kind of the realms I was in outside of the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I'm getting Reiki just talking to you. Like, you're just so calming. I know everybody tells you that, but like, it's just so nice.
Thank you.
What was I going to say? Yeah, it's cool that, you were introduced at a young age to, and especially your grandmother. I can't think of many women from your grandmother's era that were like trying alternative, although maybe it's different in San Francisco or in
Well, I
California?
grew up in Southern California, and actually, it is quite interesting. I'm so grateful for my grandma. Both of my grandmas, neither are alive anymore, but they planted big seeds in different ways. But that grandma, my mom's mom, she actually immigrated from Central America, from Guatemala. And so it made it even more unique because she really was open to every time I went to her house as a kid, I remember she was either like stretching, doing some kind of yoga, or she was making green juices or talking about diet for your blood type or going to acupuncture. And so I remember all of this and thought like, I was just like, it's interesting, but
Yeah.
it really planted a seed because I remember one time we had gone out, we went to a museum. She loved museums. And I had like a bit of a sinus cold kind of thing. And she said, "Oh, what if we go to acupuncture?" And I said, "I'll go as long as they don't put any in my face." I think I was either a freshman in high school. So yeah, I was like 13, 14. And so she's like, okay, well, let's go. And we went. And of course, the first place they did was like right in my third eye, right in my forehead. And I was like, well, I guess I'm here now. I'm in.
Mhm.
So that was my first experience. And then, yeah, I've always been really interested in that. And now I have, many friends who are acupuncturists, and it's pretty cool.
Wow. Your first needle in your third eye is
Yeah.
crazy. That's so funny. Yeah, I love that. I love that you were close to both your grandmothers. Like, that's so
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah. I feel very grateful for those relationships.
Yeah. Oh, that's very sweet. So, I want to sort of kind of break down the phases of your, I guess, transformation, if you
Yeah.
will. Because I know that there's a lot of people, myself included, who are trying to figure out how to leave the bedside. I mean, I kind
Yes.
of left the bedside, but I still work in healthcare.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel like I'm still finding my own thing, and the process, I feel like I'm still in the thick of it. And so it's almost like, yeah, I feel like talking to you is like talking to my future self a little bit, because I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
that's where I want to be. So I guess, was there a particular moment that you realized like, I want I want to leave the hospital? Did you have to do some inner work to sort of disassociate success with being a nurse? Like what was that like for you?
Yeah, there's definitely many elements and many layers. I would say there were a few experiences in the hospital that really kind of opened my eyes in a different way, that made me see that I wasn't quite aligned with many aspects of the hospital setting, bedside nursing, healthcare as a whole. And, I think there's many beautiful and positive aspects of Western medicine. And I think I didn't fully understand, even though I knew being in the environment is different, but really understanding how much of a business healthcare is in Western healthcare. And so often seeing that profits did come before patients, and just seeing that there were many values that weren't actually aligned with me the more I progressed and just saw things. And then also my first year of nursing, I had a pretty big burnout, like pretty early on in my career. What do you want to keep in your life? What do you want to release? What contributed to this moment? And so that really allowed me to just look at my life in a different way. I really saw my own pattern of putting myself last in many situations. It was always being in this identity of the caregiver, the nurturer, the one who's always there and available. And so a big piece was the identity, redesigning your identity. Part of it is releasing conditioning, and then also expanding your identity and what's possible. So the inner game is a huge aspect of it, especially when we talk about the subconscious and the inner programming. It's really 95% of our reality is created from subconscious.
Wouldn't it be nice to do something different? But then I'm quickly like, oh, but like I shouldn't think that way. And then I'll shift, you know what I mean? Or like,
Yeah.
yeah, like my beliefs kind of steer me one way or the other. Do you feel like you've seen evidence of that kind of like with your previous clients, like them finding it easier to kind of go, like what it was like more natural for them after doing like either hypnotherapy or doing identity change work? Did you find that
Yes.
a lot smoother than the opposite?
Yes, because at the deepest layer is our identity. When we have a different identity, by default, we have different beliefs, different views about ourselves, what's possible. And so really being able to reshape and look at the identity, what we've been conditioned to think. We have a lot of conditioning from growing up, from society, from cultures, if we're depending on gender too, we're given so many messages. And just to be able to detangle and again, like uncondition ourselves from that is a big part of the process. And first is just having the awareness, because most of the time we're operating on autopilot. And until we really take time to stop and reflect and look at our life, what we're creating, is it actually in alignment? Does it actually fulfill us? And a lot of times, myself, I had that big burnout, which was a wake up call. A lot of times it comes when there is a moment of pain or a rock bottom and then it really shakes us up to look at things. It doesn't always have to come about that way, but I've worked with a lot of clients who have either also like gone through a burnout, maybe a layoff, a job transition, a relationship transition. And oftentimes it is a big life event that then is the catalyst to look at things in a different way or a different lens, or say, is this actually what I want to create going forward?
But like, I remember this story that you shared at the networking event, the one where you were like running and then you couldn't do it anymore because you had worked like 3 12-hour shifts, in a row.
Yes.
Yeah. For you, it was like a literal physical burnout.
Yeah.
You had nothing
Yes.
left to give.
Yeah, I had nothing left. Yeah, no, that's one of many stories that I've had where I say I learned the hard way, and sometimes we do learn the hard way, and it serves us because then it's kind of like that line in the sand. And yeah, that story was, I was working as a full-time nurse doing 12-hour shifts in the hospital. I rarely worked 3 in a row, but I remember that particular time I did work 3 in a row, and I was also training for a marathon. And so the next morning when I woke up after my 3 in a row, I could just feel my body, everything was so heavy. And my intuition was like, no, let's rest, let's rest. But my mind was like, this is what we need to do. This is what, kind of like that inner drill sergeant voice that was taking over. And so I listened to the mind instead of my body. And still to this day, it's the only time I've fallen on a run. And, I used to be a big runner, and that was like, okay, yeah, we see the lesson here. And I was able to use it as an opportunity to say, all right, what needs to shift? And how can I also listen to my own inner voice and my own inner wisdom rather than bypassing it? Which I think in this society, Western society, we're often taught to give our power externally out rather than listen to our own intuition, our inner voice, our inner wisdom, which often, we have that gut feeling or wherever it lives in our body. And then sometimes we go beyond it and we're like, oh yeah, I already knew before.
Right. Yeah. And it's easy to kind of shut down our intuition or any sort of, especially if you're used to working 12-hour shifts, right? Like I think one of the toxic things about working in the hospital is there's a lot of quote role models, in that setting. And you see doctors that have been working for days and days on end and any other life outside of work, just you're surrounded by a lot of workaholics and high achievers and perfectionists. And so that's just who you model, and that's who you strive to be, strive to become. And so you just learn to be more like that, despite how you might feel about that, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting.
The environment really rewards, like you're saying, the, Western med rewards the long hours, the work hard, play hard mentality. There's so many things about it that, when I think about myself and my loved ones, if I was in the hospital, would I want a doctor who had just worked nonstop for, no, I wouldn't want that doctor. I would want someone fresh, right? I would want someone who's well rested, who eats well, who takes care of themselves, not someone who has just worked nonstop without taking a break or without having a day off. And it really, there is a culture that glorifies, that productivity or showing up. And I think honestly, from my experience in the hospital, that a lot of times the system can take advantage of that. It's people who are giving, who are caring, and they want to help and pour into others. But then, working a 20-hour shift or, staying overtime, that's when, the third leading cause of death in the US medical system is medical error. So, one way that can contribute to that is being tired or being overworked.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So it is, do you feel like you had a like a nurse that you worked with that was like more of a positive role model for you, that was like had boundaries at work and didn't like, took days off, and
I
or
feel like
were you like
I've
were you the first, you know?
yeah, good question. And it's a good question that no one has actually asked me. So, yeah, it's an amazing question. I would say I had to, not had to, I got to become that for myself and
That's
other people. I think that was, I shared that boundaries has been a big area of my own personal work and something now that I really empower my clients with. But I would say that was one area that it was not always easy, but I would say easier to really make good boundaries in the hospital. In my entire career, I think there were 2, maybe 3 times where I stayed overtime past 12 hours. And usually, like the management would understand after a bit of time, like, don't even ask Tosh because she'll most likely say no. And I was really good about that boundary because I knew I'm like, after 12 hours, my thinking isn't as clear. Like I'm giving medications. Like for me, it was just, I really wanted to be safe and in integrity. And so I often said no until then they stopped asking me. I mean, if I really wanted to stay, I'm sure I could have asked them and they would have been happy. But I also saw many of my coworkers try to say no, or they would say no. And then the management would keep asking them and asking them. And they would even say, I have to get my kid, or I'm picking up my child from, work, or from school. And they would say, well, can you shift it around? They would really push.
Mhm.
And so then eventually that coworker would say yes, and they would be resentful, or just, like it would create a lot of misalignment. And so I would say that was something I observed often. And that was something that I just knew for myself. I'm like, this is my line in the sand where I will say no to overtime.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's pretty incredible. And like sometimes it's easy to like over focus on like, oh, I'm making overtime pay, like, oh, the money's so good. Like I can't say no, like why should I say, but prioritizing like, like no amount of like bonus pay is like worth this kind of like lack of, because when you turn your no into yes, like I feel like you kind of lose respect for yourself a little bit. So
Yeah,
you start to
totally.
lose your, yeah, I don't know, your identity, it's just like a bad feeling with time, and it's an easy habit and it's a pattern that starts very, very young, learning how to be people pleasing and not
Yes.
saying no, and, not wanting to let other people down. But, yeah, everything you're saying is like so relatable.
Yeah, and that's a big one that you mentioned, like the people pleasing tendency is another pattern I would often see, with, again, healthcare providers, healthcare workers. And it's, again, I think that the conditioning from being younger and just the roles we played in family and the identity we take on. And to your point, that relationship with yourself, again, it's how can I really honor that relationship with myself and know I have my own back and know I'm here for myself and, what feels most true for me, and to really honor that. Doesn't mean it's always comfortable, but at the end of the day, that feeling of I showed up for myself to me is just one of the best feelings. Even if, the outcome doesn't play out as I want, I know I showed up for myself. And for me, at the end of the day, that's the true win.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's very hard to learn how to advocate for your own self, It's, yeah, not, and it's like something that can't always be taught, and I feel like in the hospital, that's, you get a lot of practice for sure, learning how to advocate for yourself, because
Yes.
you realize no one's gonna like do it for you, because like
Yes. Yeah.
after a while I started to realize that like like leadership isn't always going to track your hours for you. They're not going to be like, oh, she's already worked this much, we shouldn't ask her. They're not tracking your hours that in that way. So they could be asking a lot of you and not have not be able to know that. Like I know from experience, like from working sort of on the more administrative and leadership side of things, that it's hard to track the hours that everybody has worked. And so I realized quickly, like, but yeah, like you really are the only one that knows your schedule, that knows your life, and is going to advocate for you.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, yeah. So on the topic of burnout, did you have any fears about, I mean, like one of the seductive things about like burnout is like you feel like there's a payout, I guess, or like there's benefits of working really hard. And was there like a fear of what would happen if you kind of slowed down more, like how that would affect you, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Again, back to the identity. And I really had that identity too of a high achiever, a high performer, and really had to look at a lot of that conditioning I had, that even when I started my business, I remember I would just feel so energetically filled up after having a session with a coaching client. And I remember initially I thought, oh my gosh, is this okay? Can I have fun and work? It was like, wait, is this possible? Because there were elements I enjoyed about nursing, but let's be real, 12-hour shifts, it's work, very physical, it's very mental, it's very emotional. Really, you're using all your resources. Being on your feet for 12 plus hours, it's a physical game too. And so that was one conditioning I really had to look at and belief I really had to, dismantle that. It was like to be successful, you had to be working hard all the time. And of course, like, don't get me wrong, like parts of business and being an entrepreneur, like there's challenges too. It's not always just so easy by any means, but really looking at like what were the beliefs that were running the show for me. And there was a lot also tied into productivity and what did that mean and how does productivity connect with success and rest and taking time off. And so it's very interesting, to see these belief systems that we base so much on. And again, most of our subconscious is programmed from age 0 to 7. And so it's not all, but most of it is programmed then. And some of those programs are really helpful for what we want to create. And then some are just not in alignment. They're actually holding us back. And so for me, again, a lot of that work has been the inner work and really looking at the belief systems, the identity, kind of like proving things wrong, like asking, is that really true? Is that really a belief I want to take? And also expanding. It's so important to also be in the presence or see other examples of people who maybe are already doing what you aspire to do, because then it shows us that it's possible.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Pivot PRN podcast. We hope today's conversation inspired you to take the next step in your own pivot journey.
Remember, every big change starts with a single step, and we're here to support you the whole way. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's ready for a change.
And if you're looking for more insights, tips, or community, follow us on Instagram at Pivot PRN Podcast.
Until next time, keep pushing boundaries, and remember, it's never too late to pivot.